If a web browser is set to prevent cookies, it's still necessary to keep track of that browser to maintain a session. This is all done automatically if you set it up right. If the cookies are allowed, the session is tracked with a cookie named JSessionID. If cookies are not allowed, the links that you put into the pages you create are encoded in such a way that the JSessionID is returned with the page request. I think the best way to demonstrate this is with a couple of example pages. This is an example of a page that encodes the URL. First, the URL string is defined in a URL tag this way. The value is the URL of the page. In this case, it's a simple JSP page that's located in the same application, and that's usually what you want to do. The VAR setting is the internal name that you can use to refer to this URL. Here's how that internal name is used. This is the HTML line that creates a link. The URL for the link is the value of the URL string returned from that URL tag class. If it needs to be, the URL is encoded with a session ID. If you have several URLs in the page, you need to be sure that you encode every one of them. Any one of them that comes back to your application anyway will cause you to lose track of the session. You can read the session information inside a JSP page. Here is the page at the other end of that link that I just showed you. This session object is an object of the HTTP session class. It has a few methods that you can call to find out various things about the session. The isNew method returns true to indicate that this is a new session, or false to indicate that this is another page being displayed in an ongoing session. This method returns the value of the session ID. Now, this same code works whether the session ID cookie is set to transmit the value or whether it's done with the URL encoding. First, let's look at what happens if cookies are accepted by the browser. Here's a page that sets the session ID. And here is the source code of that page. In this code, the link for the other page is perfectly normal. The session ID number has been stored as a cookie, as we saw in the previous example. And here's the page that displays the session ID value. First, it says that this is not a new session, and that's true. The session was initiated in the other page, the one that originally set the cookie, and that page would have returned the value indicating a new session. Here is the session ID number. This same number can be returned to any page in this application, and that's how the session can be tracked. Now let's look at it the other way. If the cookies are turned off, it will still work, but it will do it in a slightly different way. Now this browser has no cookies and will no longer accept cookies. Let's look at the page that encodes the URL. The page looks the same, but from here, it looks a little different. The URL has been encoded to carry the value of the JSession ID. Notice this parameter is separated from the URL with a semicolon, so it won't have any effect on things if you also add parameters. It acts just like the simple URL, except it's got the session ID included as part of it. Now, you notice this was done automatically. Java code was generated that checks the browser to determine whether it can set a cookie, and if it can't, it encodes the URL. That's what that URL tag does. The same code on your part takes care of this in either case. Now to check the decoding. Here again is the page that displays the session ID. It looks exactly the same as it did before, but in this case, the session ID came from the encoded URL instead of a cookie. The point is that you can write your code without regard to whether or not the browser accepts cookies. Just encode all your URLs, and it will work either way.